Culture warriors have also tried to insist that they is a singular pronoun rather than a plural, when it's only ever used as singular when the person you're referring to is a complete stranger. You might say someone's left their luggage here because you don't know who it is you're talking about. It's a colloquialism that enables us to avoid the cumbersome phrase his or her. But they hasn't been recognised as a singular pronoun in formal English for a long time. Advocates will say, well, Shakespeare used they as singular. Right, that's because language evolves. He also used thou as a familiar mode of address and you as formal, but we don't do that anymore either. I'm not going to start calling people my liege just because Shakespeare did it. If the use of they as a singular pronoun becomes prevalent through the natural evolution of language, I would welcome it. But in spite of what many media outlets pretend, this hasn't happened. And it's unlikely to happen because using they as singular has a tendency to create grammatical confusion. Now, don't get me wrong, I take the liberal view on everything. I think you should be able to call yourself whatever you like, use whatever pronouns you like, and ask others to do the same. But in a liberal society, you can't force other people to speak in the way you want them to. That's why this matters. It's the principle of the thing. And it isn't just online activists. Increasingly, businesses, corporations and other institutions are now adopting policies that seek to encourage staff to declare their pronouns, usually at the beginning of meetings or in email signatures. It was revealed this week that the Scottish Civil Service has asked staff members to take a pledge that they will include pronouns in emails. But why? You'll never have to use someone's pronouns in an email because you're talking to them, not about them. So something else is going on here. As it turns out, 60% of respondents at the Civil Service said they had no intention of doing so. As is so often the case with these initiatives that are meant to foster inclusivity, they end up causing more division. So what I'd like to do, given that it's my show and I can do what I like, is offer you, for your consideration, the liberal and progressive argument for not declaring pronouns. As with so many debates in the culture wars, the issue of pronouns has been misrepresented as simply a question of whether you are on the right or the wrong side of history. Activists say it's just a way to be inclusive, kind, polite, and in many cases that is clearly the intention. But it's not the intention that matters, it's the impact. When you ask someone to declare his or her pronouns, you are doing one of two things. You are either saying that you can't recognise this person's sex, or you are saying that you believe in the notion of gender identity and expect others to do so as well. So it's either a practical question or a statement of ideological fealty. In virtually all cases, it's the latter, because we are all very well attuned to identifying the sex of other people, and if you're unsure, you find ways around it. Asking someone for their pronouns can actually be extremely offensive. It's basically saying, I don't know what you are. It's particularly offensive to those who are gender non-conforming. For instance, women who reject stereotypes in favour of femininity and dress in a traditionally masculine way are often misgendered or called sir, and this can be very upsetting. Julie Bindel, the feminist writer, has pointed out that for lesbians who are told that they look like men, when you ask them, what are your pronouns, this is a kind of attack, because they've struggled for so long to achieve acceptance as women who simply don't conform to sex stereotypes. This is why many lesbians take the question, what are your pronouns, to be an insult. So there's that. But as I say, in almost all cases, to expect someone to announce their pronouns is to invite them to state that they agree with the ideological premise of gender identity. The trouble is, most people simply don't believe in it. I don't identify as male, I just happen to be biologically male. It's a fact, as mundane as the fact that I've got blue eyes, or that I'm right-handed, or that I'm allergic to quiche. However, those who believe in gender identity see it as a kind of innate quality, something like a sexed soul, as Helen Joyce puts it in her recent book, Trans. We're not talking about gender dysphoria here, trans people who feel at odds with their sex and seek to adapt either through medical procedures or the way they present themselves in order to feel comfortable. We're talking about the idea that we each have an inherent gender identity which has nothing to do with our bodies. This is akin to a religious conviction. And we don't ask people to declare their faith in Christ or Allah or Baal at the beginning of meetings, because people shouldn't be compelled to say things they don't believe. It's a fundamental liberal value. Those who are supportive of pronoun declarations tend to ally themselves with the critical social justice movement, which is grounded in the belief that our perception of the world is constructed predominantly through language. This is why social justice activists are often sceptical about free speech, why they support hate speech legislation. It's also why many of them believe in compelled speech. In other words, they have authoritarian instincts. Of course, no employers are demanding that people say their pronouns in meetings or sign off emails in that way. Not yet, anyway. But there is something coercive about the request. Let's take the theatre industry. An actor friend of mine told me recently that it's now common for members of the cast to announce their pronouns at the start of early rehearsals. And he says it isn't really a feasible option to refuse. For one thing, it's not a very well understood topic, so you'd be kicking off a big debate about why not everyone present will be on board with this. You'll be creating tension at the very beginning of a rehearsal process where everyone needs to get on. More seriously, if you're seen to be rocking the boat, or if someone accuses you of transphobia, which they no doubt would if you registered an objection, then you wouldn't get cast again. Who's going to scupper their own career over a couple of words? Most people just want an easy life. But if you believe in liberal values, you have to take a stand on this. Many trans people are opposed to pronoun declaration for a number of reasons. It draws needless attention to them when they just want to get on with their own lives. It creates a false impression that most people believe in gender identity ideology when the majority, including many trans people, simply don't. Most importantly, compelled speech is a fundamentally illiberal prospect, one that should always be resisted. So if your employer asks you to state your pronouns, my advice would be to refuse and to explain your reasons. You might well be accused of transphobia or hate, but that is part of the coercive strategy. And I think it's worth standing up to ideologues who insist on imposing their values onto everyone else.